Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Tourism Commission's presentation on trends and opportunities for the tourism industry. My name is Catherine Mulligan, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst and Communication Strategist for the CTC. For any of you who have not been able to log on to the site to see the presentation, it's available on SlideShare by visiting www.slideshare.net/CTC_CCT. Just look for the Trends and Insights presentation. And please do stay on the phone with us. I'd like to introduce to you the folks in the room today with me. Paul Nursey is our Vice President responsible for CTC's strategy management, research, and corporate communications. Michelle Dubreuil is our Research Director. And Kate Duffy is our Social Media Manager. Given the number of participants on the line, we have muted your phones. We encourage you to ask questions using the chat feature on the right-hand side of the presentation screen, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible. We will be gathering your questions as we go, and our plan is to leave plenty of time to get to as many of them as possible today. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Kate, and I'd like to extend a big welcome to everyone on the line today. This presentation and session will take about 40 minutes, and we'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to join us today. This is a bit of a different style of presentation for the Canadian Tourism Commission. It's not the typical Canadian Tourism Commission presentation that you see many of our staff around the world presenting. We won't spend as much time on specific marketing strategies or specific CTC programs. We won't spend as much time talking about the great Canada tourism brand, Canada Keep Exploring, or our Explore Quotient segments, but rather more in the strategic context that we're all operating in. Today is all about insights. Trying to capture all the global, economic, political, social, and technological trends would be a massive task. Today, this scan captures and distills material that we hope will support our tourism industry partners at all levels in their strategic plans for the coming year and beyond. Set against a backdrop of the current economic and political policy state, all these things affect the state of play for Canada's tourism industry, and this scan casts a look ahead to 2014 and beyond. Really, for everyone on the line, I hope that they can take away one or two business insights that can help their business. That's our objective for today. The reason we've chosen to share this presentation deck through a webinar is that this is the kind of strategic presentation that myself or my team give to business communities around Canada. We give these to the heads of provincial tourism marketing organizations, federal, provincial, territorial deputy ministers, destination marketing organizations, and the private sector. We always get invited to come back and do more presentations, so we thought it would be interesting to share some of this more strategic framework with you today and see how it goes. On this slide is the framework of an environmental scan. It captures the economic, political, legal, social, technological, and environmental factors that have been used and considered as part of this forward-looking scan. By using this PESTLE framework, as it's called, these insights were identified through extensive literature review and consultation with subject matter experts. It's part of our own business planning cycle. Our CTC research and strategy teams compiles this information with the intent of informing our strategic planning process for the coming year. Like every year, 2012 held notables for our industry, such as the world receiving its 1 billionth tourist in December, international tourist, and an important communication channel like Facebook hitting 1 billion active users in October. We know that 2013 will offer up new challenges and greater opportunities for Canada. It's a matter of understanding the environment and developing strategies that mitigate the bad and take advantage of those great opportunities. These and many other events will shape the forward-looking context as we operate. The key takeaway here is that the world is always evolving and changing, and our team is on top of looking forward to see what is shaping our future environment. First of all, undoubtedly one of the greatest factors with the influence on tourism today is the prolonged global economic slump. Clearly, our economy is operating in a less vital context and is not operating at full capacity. But there is some stability, and that stability presents opportunities. As a result of it, we are facing some important drivers, such as a high but stable energy costs, also a strong but a very stable Canadian dollar. And the United States, Canada's largest source market, although the fiscal cliff seems to have been avoided for the time being, the country is nonetheless confronted with a massive public debt, which will have a constraining effect on public expenditures and private consumption. The European Union's economy is gradually recovering, but it's in a climate of prolonged uncertainty. And while China is increasingly becoming a global economic leader, due to its high dependence on exports to the U.S. and Europe, its economic growth is in fact moderating to a slightly reduced pace. So how do we tie this back to the Canadian tourism industry? This environment of uncertainty is being accepted as the new norm from which to operate, and which we are seeing consumers showing signs of recovery. It is anticipated with this shift, more forward-looking planning will result, lending to some predictability in travel. Quite frankly, we've all been living with this for the past 5 or 6 years, and we've now entered a platform where there is some context and there is some stability as we move forward. Delving a little deeper into one of our most important international regions for source markets, the European Union's economy is gradually recovering, but in a climate of prolonged uncertainty. The European economy as a whole is seeing another year of recession in 2013, with a 0.2% decline in GDP. However, within that context, there are 3 key markets for Canada that the Canadian Tourism Commission operates. The German market is growing slowly. It is very much steady as she goes. France is showing unexpected resiliency and a little bit of growth, and the United Kingdom is also showing a slow and steady recovery. These signs of recovery are good news for Canada, with these all-important source markets for all regions of our country, with their long stay and high-spending customers. China is an increasingly important source market for Canada. And a shift in the continent to shifting to the continent of Asia, and more specifically China, is an important present and future source market, and is quickly becoming a global economic leader. It's projected by 2020 there will be 100 million outbound Chinese travelers. But they are facing constraints on growth. China's high level of dependence on exports, particularly to the U.S. and Europe, is resulting in economic growth slowing at a reduced pace. There are 3 key drivers across this dimension. The projected growth tied to the U.S. and Eurozone recoveries. China does have new leadership, and that transition seems to have gone well. There is a need and a reality in the Chinese economy where there is a pivot towards a domestic consumption or domestic-led by freeing up some personal savings and developing a more robust middle-class and service-based economy. That said, China continues to grow and is well represented in its surge in outbound travels to Canada. Over the last 3 years, Canada has seen roughly 20% growth on average, with it poised to becoming one of Canada's principal inbound tourism markets. The Canadian Tourism Commission is often asked what we see ahead in the tourism landscape for Canada. Every year in December, we do a forecast of what the year may bring, and on this slide is our forecast that we developed in December of 2012. For 2013, we are expecting an increase of just over 2% of the numbers of tourists from our target overseas markets, and just over 3% in revenue from those visits. We believe that the expected slower growth from some of our established markets will be partially offset by the higher growth in the numbers of visits from our emerging markets. The important U.S. leisure market will still continue on its path of slow recovery. Importantly, from a market growth perspective, markets like Australia, China, Brazil, and India are at their peak arrivals numbers and are forging new incremental growth for Canada. One of the strengths of tourism as an industry is that it's increasingly being recognized as being among the fastest growing industries in the world. The tourism and travel sector really has been the star performer of the economic recovery period. In fact, according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, annual international tourist arrivals surpassed 1 billion in 2012. Between now and 2030, international tourist arrivals are set to increase by an average of 43 million a year to 1.8 billion. Today, global tourism accounts for $1.2 trillion in exports annually, 9% of exports worldwide, and 9% of GDP, and is responsible for 1 out of every 12 jobs. As an export service category, tourism ranks #1 in Canada, demonstrating its importance to the Canadian economy. But there are broader impacts of the tourism and travel sector. Tourism has a much greater indirect contribution. Tourism is one of the components that makes up a nation's brand or how it's viewed around the world. We also know that tourism facilitates international trade. On the topic of trade, global trade is undergoing a radical transformation. Over the last decade, trade between the BRIC countries in North America, Europe, and Japan has grown by nearly 300% to reach more than $2 trillion. At the same time, trade between the BRIC nations themselves have increased by 1,000% to almost $320 billion. The key takeaway here is that travel and trade are integrated. Familiarity breeds trade. So tourism does more than just drive direct economic impact. It also drives greater trade growth. Globally, wealth is clearly changing hands and is moving from Western economies towards emerging economies, and Canada is benefiting from having a strong nation brand that helps facilitate both tourism and trade. Changing gears a little bit, I'm now going to focus in on the markets, the consumers within those markets, and their engagement with marketing communication products such as our work here at the CTC or many other tourism marketers. Research has told us about how customers interact with a brand and the process that drives the decision of where, when, and how these customers will travel, and then speak about their travel. In front of you is what we refer to as the consumer's path to purchase, a framework for a consumer's journey to purchase to Canada. The path to purchase aids us in providing a deeper understanding to develop relevant communications, allowing the Canadian Tourism Commission and its partners to better understand and distinguish prospective versus non-prospective travelers and where they fall along this path to purchase or their purchase journey. We used to consider this a reductive process, where consumers progressively narrowing down their list of destination options until the path to purchase ends with a booking for Canada. More recent work is undertaken and has shown the purchase path is a loop rather than a reductive process. Adding the exploring and recommending steps to the path closes this loops and are crucial components to the consumer's journey. This is really about sharing, exploring, and recommending through channels like social media. This framework allows us to anticipate a prospective customer's needs, perceptions, and behaviors at each step, and provides a clear representation of a consumer's journey in travel decision-making, purchasing, experiencing the destination, and ultimately influencing others. Now I'm going to talk about some of the big global trends in terms of the demographic shifts we're seeing around the world. This is a broad global framework. As a broader framework than our Explore Quotient segmentation tool that you may hear us talk about. In fact, our excellent work in marketing segmentation operates within a global context. Nevertheless, we think it's very valuable to share some of these big macro trends that we're seeing around the world. The number of Generation Ys, or those aged 18 to 29, has reached an all-time high, and these young people are looking for ways to expand their horizons and assert themselves on the global scene. From a market perspective, China's working population is set to peak this year, while the urban workforce populations continue to grow. China's workforce is shifting from a low-skilled to a service-oriented and high-skilled labor market, and as a result, more affluent, upperly mobile workers, including youth, will be ready and eager to travel abroad. Tourism marketers need to consider targeting these groups with higher discretionary spending and a readiness to move away from the frugality of generations past, and they're looking really to trade up. How we're seeing this self-manifest on the ground is that out of China, we are actually seeing about 65% of our visa applications being from fully independent travelers, and less on the traditional bus tours that many other countries have experienced after receiving approved destination status. In India, unlike most other world populations, we will continue to see its working age population grow. At the same time, continued urbanization will result in more Indian outbound travelers in the future. Globally, 60 plus is the fastest growing demographic group worldwide. At the same time, another story is playing out. Mature economies such as Japan, Germany, the United States, and the United Kingdom have aging demographics and a declining workforce. This puts a strain on pensions and retirement planning, as well as a burden on younger workers, and all adds up to a potential smaller pool of those who have discretionary funds in the medium to long term. In fact, for the first time in our history, people aged 65 and older will soon outnumber children under 5. According to the UN Population Division, 1 in 5 are expected to be 65 or older by 2035. As a result of increases in life expectancy and the trend towards active lifestyles, we can now expect to spend 20 to 25% of our lives in active retirement. In addition, since physical and intellectual activity are still very popular in upcoming generation, there's every indication that seniors of the future will be even more educated, cultured, and healthy. They will be extremely well-informed consumers looking for travel experiences similar to the ones their children have had, but of course making allowances for their age and condition. Concurrently, millennials is another demographic phenomenon. They are increasing importance and consideration for the tourism sector moving forward. The Canadian Tourism Commission has taken notice and is exploring opportunities around youth travel or the millennial generation. For example, in Canada alone, youth age 18 to 29 number 5 million plus and are making up roughly 15% of the population. And for those of you who think that young travelers don't spend very much, our research says it's quite a different story. They are noted for taking longer trips with greater spends than other age groups, with almost 3/4 of young Canadians spending more than $1,000 per trip and 41% spending more than $2,000. This represents a Canada to leverage this highly connected group. By encouraging Canadian domestic youth to explore their own country first, it not only helps quell Canada's fascination with outbound travel, but creates a new and highly valuable generation of Canadian advocates. We're exploring ways to inspire Canadian youth to fall in love with their own country and then share that love of their country with their friends and families and connections around the world. So what I'd like to do now is throw the presentation to Kate Duffy, our manager of social media, to talk a little bit about some of the tools to connect with today's youth traveler.
Thanks, Paul. I think to be successful in engaging Canadian youth, we need to start by looking at product development before we jump into thinking about the marketing itself. So I think the first step would be to work with our industry providers to develop product tailored to youth that will allow them to stretch their budgets further. Think about the Ural Pass in Europe that offers affordable train travel options that fit with a longer backpacking style of travel, or the hop-on, hop-off bus passes that are available in New Zealand. What about developing a network of youth hostels across Canada, or a partnership with a youth travel agency network? We need to have the basic product and distribution in place, ready to sell to youth before we can start marketing to youth. The second step would involve engaging tourism suppliers themselves to give them the time to develop and enhance their youth travel experiences. Something like a Youth Canadian Signature Experiences program could be a great way to align industry around this. So once we've got the right product and distribution in place, then we can move on to thinking about how we market to youth. I believe it will be important to include an aspect of brand awareness for Canada. Many Canadian youth have likely had fairly regional exposure to their home country. When you consider this in combination to the fact that we'll be up against other exotic destinations that are competing to attract the Canadian youth traveller, I think it will be important to surprise youth by highlighting what they don't know about Canada, if we are to be successful in enticing them to explore Canada first. We need to position Canada as an exciting destination, and one that will give youth the sort of life experience they're seeking from travel. A couple of other insights about the youth traveller I think we need to keep in mind. Youth are influenced by their friends. They want to belong to a group, but also be seen as an individual. Youth want to be engaged. We need to think about ways we can invite them to co-create or participate with us in a campaign, as opposed to pushing one-way messaging at them. We'll need to make them the focus of the campaign. Think about leveraging influencers. Is there a way to incorporate youth ambassadors or youth celebrities into the program? Another area would be new media. Youth are wired, savvy, and very suspicious of traditional marketing. They've grown up in the era of social media. It will be important to have an established brand presence across new media channels so that we're in the same channels youth are in every day? Is there an option to partner with other brands that are already established with the Canadian youth segment? I think here about brands like Red Bull or Coca-Cola who've been successfully marketing to youth for decades. Is there an opportunity to partner with those brands? We should also consider incorporating exclusive perks and deals, or perhaps an element of gaming into a program. And finally, I think it's important to acknowledge something that came out in our early research efforts, and that is that youth want to give back. They have a real desire to feel a sense of purpose. Is there a way to include the opportunity for youth to volunteer, for example, while travelling? So that's just a couple of my thoughts, Paul, on what I believe to be the keys to success in engaging the Canadian youth segment.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Kate. And to everyone on the line and our Canadian tourism industry partners, stay tuned. There may be some more action on the youth front. I'd like to go back to kind of the core of the working population now, as we talk about a very other important segment to target. Of course, those who are working, those who have disposable income, those who are very engaged in the economy. However, there's some important new trends to consider when targeting kind of the bulk of the economy. Travelers today are mixing business and pleasure like never before. According to a Focusrite study, 47% of business travelers add a leisure extension to at least one of their trips every year. They want that flexibility of work and life balance in their day-to-day lives. While this isn't entirely new information, what's important to consider is the connectivity they require when they begin to blend their leisure and business time together. Corporate travelers never leave their virtual offices far behind, as shown by the number of Blackberries or tablets on sun loungers by the pool or at the hotel bar. Since most business travelers no longer work with companies with big travel accounts, they can cherry-pick travel deals on accommodations, flights, and local experiences. Reinforcing this trend is a newly released survey on business travel by the Wyndham Hotel Group. It found that 25% of global business travelers always include some personal time when they're on their business itineraries. On top of that, 2/3 invite family to join them on their business travel, while 52% of U.S. travelers invite their family along for the whole trip. This change in travel behavior means openings for marketers and Canadian tourism businesses alike to capitalize and look at fresh ways of enticing travelers. And with this trend intensifying, industry will need to be ready to service these customers on a number of fronts. More broadly, I see a big takeaway from this trend is we hear more and more about working-life blend and less about work-life balance. So both we're seeing extensions onto business trips, and for those who are traveling on leisure trips, you do have to understand that people will be mixing business with their pleasure. So speaking of mobile devices, let's talk about how people are interacting with the ever-evolving technology of today and, of course, tomorrow. The rapid proliferation of smartphones and tablets over the past few years has fueled significant changes in how today's global traveler behaves. Today, customers have the power to connect anytime, anywhere, often from their choice of device. As a player in the tourism industry, it's important to understand how different consumers are using different devices as they progress through each stage of the travel process, from destination research to booking, to how they're using their tablets, built in with cameras, for their on-the-ground experience, sharing those experiences, and then sharing post-travel when they return home. It's also become easier and easier to access free Wi-Fi when traveling, and this allows travelers to connect and share their travel experiences in the moment via their social networks. This liberation means that travel marketers are no longer completely control their messages, making businesses more reliant upon social media and mobile channels to tell their story. It's all about having the platform, the message, and of course the timing, and that's all part of our marketing strategy as we embrace this world. Another opportunity that we see is to really leverage customers talking to each other. More international travelers, we did talk about the 1 billion international travelers earlier in the presentation, equals more people sharing their stories, more videos, more images via social media. One interesting indicator is the Edelman Trust Barometer. This measures public confidence in messengers, such as politicians, business leaders, people like you and people like me. And these platforms used to deliver their messages, such as How much do we trust the newspaper? How much do we trust magazine, broadcasts, social media, and in fact the message embedded within it? For 2012, it showed an overall decline in trust in the media generally. However, social media, including social network sites, content sharing sites, blogs, and microblogging sites, saw the biggest upswing in trust at a positive 75%. This implies that the public has a greater trust in itself. Therefore, the opportunity to increase travelers through trusted advocacy on social media via friends, advocates, and contacts should be a big business for Canada and for all of our partners. The Trust Barometer also examined the number of times people need to hear something in order to believe it. 63% said between 3 and 5 times is required. Looking for the opinions and recommendations via social media, microblogging sites, etc. from various choices allows us as consumers to check the facts, get different perspectives from a range of different sources. The reality today is that the consumer is more in control of the brand and the message. We need to listen, be flexible and dynamic to ensure credibility, and our platforms need to be up to date and continue to innovate to remain relevant to our audiences. Once again, I'll ask Kate to comment a little bit about how we've seen some of these trends in our own work.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I love the Edelman Trust Barometer. I encourage everyone to check out their latest report. And I think that what it really speaks to is the idea that people trust recommendations from their friends and family more than they do any other form of marketing. I think if we reflect back, say, 15 years ago, it was a different story. I think back then it was really the expert that we trusted first and foremost. In travel, you know, that was the travel journalist, for example. If we fast forward 5 years on from there, that really started to shift, and we saw the rise of the trust in the third-party review sites like TripAdvisor. We really started to trust complete strangers that were reviewing destinations that we were going to. But fast forward another 5 years to today, and this is where we've really seen this idea of the power of friends. And I think it speaks to the complete dominance of a network like Facebook, where we're able to connect with our friends and see their recommendations, and we see that that's very influential in terms of the purchase decisions that we make. And I think at the CTC, we sort of execute on that findings of the Edelman Trust Barometer with campaigns like our 35 Million Directors program, where we were looking to create an anthem for Canada, an ultimate TV spot that we could show internationally to motivate the international traveller. And we really tapped into this insight that it was our best advocates, which is Canadians, that are going to be best placed to help us produce that piece, rather than us spend a whole lot of money creating a highly produced TV commercial. We tapped into Canadians and invited them to share their experiences. We had 65 hours of footage submitted that we edited down to a 2-minute piece, and by far that spot has been the most successful campaign that we've run.
Great, thank you, Kate. That was a really interesting campaign, and it demonstrates the shift that we're seeing. I'm going to speak now to a different shift that we're seeing, and this helps inform decision makings. The proliferation of new technology and sources of information is exposing us as marketers and all business people to an increasingly massive amounts of information, which is often referred to as big data. This is a huge gray area for tourism marketing, and travel is one of the hottest topics online in the discussions around big data. This is something that our team is committed to tackling and scoping this year. With the wealth of information available through surveys, loyalty programs, social media, consumer purchase data, real-time feedback on social networks, and more, it's increasingly difficult for businesses to have the time and resources to sift through the data. We often hear it said that big data is actually a people issue. However, big data is considered to be the next frontier for innovation, competition, and productivity. The consultation firm McKinsey estimates that retailers could realize a 60% increase in their operating margins by using big data intelligently. This represents both a challenge and an opportunity for the Canadian tourism sector. Innovative businesses will measure their initiatives and listen to social networks and transactions to gauge what their customers choose and why. But all businesses will need to keep abreast of the change in technology and tools, and at the same time be wary of the shifting legal minefield of consumer privacy. Industry will need to make sure they have the right skills in the right room to make sense of this data and be adaptable to technology to truly leverage the value of what is collected. Really, it's all about finding those business insights and competitive advantages than executing aggressively against them. So for more insight, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Dubois, our Manager of Market Research, to talk about the change management associated with big data.
Thank you, Paul. I don't think the industry can afford to operate in a vacuum in this fast-emerging issue. That's a huge one. The industry will need to make sure that they have indeed the right skills in the room to make sense of this data. In many ways, it is indeed a people's issue, one that involves the ability to ask the right questions, and in particular, business leaders articulating what they need for their business. We will need to be adaptable to technology to truly leverage the value of what is collected, and it is really the next frontier in business analytics. One of the first thing is to figure out what the so-called big data means to you. Technically, a simple way to explain big data is through the 3 V's: volume, velocity, and variety. More than ever, you now have access to a variety of data sources in small and large volume of information that is available to you at a greater velocity or more rapidly than ever before. It may involve you doing a bit of psycho-technological or demographic work. The rapid adoption of technologies is also triggering a change in consumer behavior, which can vary between generations. We've talked about Generation Y or the millennium before, and the boomers, so they have different ways of using technologies and different platforms. And it can also vary between different countries or different cultures. Some of the data that you saw as reliable before for, say, trending purposes may be losing some of its precision with some of your customer base. So we now have a mosaic of information sources from which it will be important to understand who is using what platform and how they're using it, particularly as it relates to the touch points along the path to purchase. So the concept of big data and its implication on tourism is an area that we at CTC Research are exploring this year. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Michelle. Now that we've gone from social media and big data, I'm now going to go right down to that retail component of the path to purchase and talk a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the traditional travel agents, because there's a lot of vitality in that space. With the enormous rise of digital platforms, travel consolidators, websites, booking engines, OTAs, online travel agencies, those all eclipse the role of the travel agents in today's consumer path to purchase, particularly around the awareness phase and the early phase of the path to purchase. Although many traditional bricks and mortar travel agencies have endured a decline in disintermediation in past years, many are fighting back by offering a more specialized services. So this is really a story of adaptation for travel agencies because they continue to remain extremely relevant. According to Focusrite study, 75% of leisure travel storefront consultants have adopted a professional specialization, such as adventure travel, cruising, group travel, student travel, or weddings and honeymoons. These agents have integrated technology and social networks to their work in line with their consumer demands or to exploit their niche. Luxury travelers are overwhelmed by options, and so the travelers or the consumers themselves, often who are extremely busy in their lives, are increasingly entrusting their experts, their personal travel agents, to decide and plan every component of their holiday. That said, a number of studies have also shown that travelers often do their own homework online before they go and see a travel agent to negotiate the best deal. A recent Thomas Cook study revealed that while electronic devices may be popular for researching trips, 46% of customers still prefer to book holidays face-to-face. Travel agents still play a pivotal role in the international emerging markets for Canada, such as India, China, and Brazil, where the retail travel agency is incredibly powerful. Programs such as the CTC's Canada Specialist programs are still relevant in this increasingly online travel environment, and we have more than 10,000 Canada Specialist travel agencies registered in our databases that we communicate to on a regular basis. Aircraft manufacturers are offering the airline industry some significantly improved aircraft. The Airbus double-decker A380 first put into service in 2007 is one example. As the world's largest aircraft, it can carry up to 853 passengers over 15,400 kilometers. But what is next is what is generating excitement, are these mid-sized, fuel-efficient planes. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner jet is the first of such planes that will revolutionize the aviation industry. Airbus's version, the A350X, will have its first delivery scheduled for 2014. The Dreamliner's, its fuselage is made of special carbon fiber, is 20% more fuel efficient, and can cover distances that were previously possible only in large aircraft. This aircraft will have the ability to satisfy demand for connections between large and medium-sized cities or two mid-sized cities very profitably, therefore being able to bypass major hubs. Another trend worldwide that Canada is very well positioned for is this whole notion of experiential traveler. And increasing numbers of international travelers are predicted to seek out that authentic holiday destination and experience that allows them to disconnect with everyday life and connect to the real environment around them. These travelers want to experience their destinations in every way possible through sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Travelers are moving away from commoditized travel experiences in search of localized, unique, and fresh travel. Canada, as I mentioned earlier, is extremely well positioned to deliver on this because we are an authentic destination, and this is something that all of us have embraced as part of our brand strategies up to 10 years ago. Canada is rich in travel experiences that stimulate the senses, and we've gained international kudos for delivering on this trend. This is one of the reasons why I think that Canada has, even though we've struggled to grow our arrivals numbers, we've grown significantly in terms of tourism revenue, as we add value and service and experience to our tourism offering. What's new to this experiential travel segment is that there's now a broader definition of the travelers. More and more, experiential or active travel, which engages those senses, is not just narrowly defined to active lifestyles. It's broadening to envelop a much broader definition of the population. Finally, this is something that you may read about a lot when talking about the trends for 2013 and beyond. And we know this is a trend, something to take notice of. We're not sure how mainstream this will get yet. And this may seem contradictory to our focus on the business and leisure blur more earlier, but more and more consumers are overwhelmed by the pace and commitments and are in their constantly connected lives and are seeking an offline sanctuary. The simple ability to turn off a smartphone, tablet, and PC and to disconnect from the grind of modern life is increasingly a prized travel experience. Digital detox means cutting off the endless supply of emails, text messages, tweets, Facebook updates, and group discussions that fill most people's lives every day, and simply unplug and get away for a little while. As a result, some hotels are now revising their traditional in-house detox packages by cutting out the user's ability to use technology. Of course, not for everyone, but for a certain group within their customer base. Relaxation, balance, and spiritual renewal are trumping more traditional resorts and destinations for wired consumers. Meditation centers and spas in the heart of the countryside are a new trend, and silent retreats are one of the trends that Huffington Post identified as one of 2013's biggest travel trends. We also saw that again this Saturday in the Globe and Mail's top travel trends for 2013 and beyond. So as we start to wrap up the formal presentation, I just want to bring this back to the path of purchase, because this is a great framework for understanding the various touch points along the consumer's journey. Anticipating shifts, new opportunities, and aligning your offerings to customers is vital for success. Listening to the conversation instead of trying to direct it is a key to making sure that your messages resonate. This loop is powerful. The advocacy is a facilitator of decisions and travel to Canada. It's also a very cost-effective approach to marketing. Making sure all this is seamless is crucial and takes all the players, big and small, in order to be successful. So to summarize our takeaways from this webinar, we'll go through those quickly and then head into a few questions. It's important to take notice of the big picture. We are having a struggling economy which isn't quite at capacity, but there is some greater economic certainty and stability. This will help to facilitate travel planning. The focus on the quality. Canada is a bit of an expensive proposition, but we deliver tremendous value. Canada has a very high repeat visitation rate and a very high customer satisfaction rate. Tap into those markets and big demographic change. Educated and mobile youth are eager to grow. Early boomers retiring, they do have some financial uncertainties, but later boomers who saved well are retiring and eager to travel. Listen to the conversation. You need to have all of us need to have a holistic digital media strategy. It's no longer nice to have, but it's an essential pillar of branding and marketing. focus on appropriate content, and remember the customer really does control that message. Our job is to really engage and interact with it. Learn to sift through the digital space for information insights. In terms of facilitating the travel decisions, don't forget about the travel agents. They're still important at the retail component. And, align your offerings. Remember the experiential travel. There's a hunger for meaningful and innovative business and leisure travel experiences. So we will answer a few questions, but if you do require more information, all of our research, stats, insights are posted on our corporate site, and the web address is there for you. If you want to see how customers see us on the web space, our consumer site is there. You're also welcome to follow the Canadian Tourism Commission at our corporate Twitter handle. And of course, one of the easiest way to get your businesses engaged with us in the social media space is to share your pictures of unique experiences with the hashtag #ExploreCanada. So with that, we're going to take some questions, and we'll leave this up on the screen. We'll probably spend about 5 minutes on questions.
Thanks, Paul. That was fantastic. We had a lot of questions come in, and we're just going to get to them. The first one, I think this one's directed at you, Kate. What is the guarantee of social media in terms of it working on other continents? For example, Europe doesn't seem as advanced as some of the other markets, such as the United States, or even our domestic market here in Canada. So, do you think you could give us some feedback on that, Kate? Sorry.
Sure, Kate. That's a good question, and I think it starts by being honest that success can never be guaranteed. But there's a lot we can do to set ourselves up for success. Looking to Europe, we've assessed what social channels are being used by our target traveller in those markets and how they're using them. I think it's important to note that it's not a one-size-fits-all for every market regarding social media. Each is unique, and you may have a global social media strategy, but that strategy needs to be localized when it comes to execution to ensure that it's relevant. And when I say relevant, I mean, in terms of the different social platforms that you have a brand presence on per market. It can also relate to the content that you choose to cultivate, and as well how you engage with your target traveller in each market. So, for example, in Germany we know that Twitter is not a major platform, but they are highly engaged on Facebook, for example. So I just think it's important to build your strategies around the nuance of each market.
Oh, that's great, Kate. Thanks very much for sharing. Our next question I have here is, China is always talked about as the biggest opportunity, but how can smaller businesses capture some of the Asian market? Michelle, how about you answer that one?
Sure, thank you, Kate. Well, yes, as mentioned earlier, China is, of course, a very important market for us. I think we all know that it's a great source of international traveler with more disposable income and an eye on Canada, increasingly so. So our recommendation is to first do your research and use ours. We have a lot of information available about China on our website, particularly on the research section. Use our resources. A lot of our studies are providing you all kind of answers to how to approach China and who to target. Check out the Canadian Signature Experiences criteria. That you can use as a benchmark for going after international customers. Also work with your own DMOs and your PMOs. They have themselves a lot of information. And if you're a DMO or a PMO, work with the CTC in China to leverage every dollar so you can have maximum impact, because we're up against some very big spender in that market, particularly Australia, and everyone sees China as an important growth market. So, thank you, Kate.
Oh, thanks very much. I think this question will be best addressed by Paul. Paul, can you tell us how you're helping small business?
Great. Thank you very much, Kate. That's a great question. We do operate at the national and international level, but we do take our role supporting a profitable and viable tourism industry as a very important strategic pillar. So what we would recommend people do is, of course, engage with their regional and destination marketing tourism organizations. And of course, if you're very much focused on the export market, your provincial and territorial organizations. But that being said, we do work through the Signature Experiences Collection, where we have a suite of several hundred businesses. And also, I would highly recommend that you visit our corporate site, sign up for CTC News, so that you get information and insights like this that you can use and leverage in your own business. Because really, it is us at the Canadian Tourism Commission working with our tourism partners that try to create those platforms that industry can use to sell their businesses internationally.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks, Paul. We've got one more question here before we wrap for the day. A question came in here. It says, you know, you've talked about two key demographics, the millennials and the Zoomers, and social media. While it works strongly for the former, what is the CTC's route for the latter?
That's a great question, and this is a question that could probably be an entire different webinar. When we talk about those working age or boomers or Zoomers, this is where our Explorer Quotient segmentation tool comes into play. We have actively segmented all 11 of our international source markets, and our three biggest targets are the authentic experiencers, the cultural explorers, and even the free spirits. And they all kind of fit into that demographic profile. So this is where segmentation and demographics overlay. I don't want to get too technical or into too much marketing jargon here. These groups are engaged in social media, but we are also very much engaged in a holistic marketing strategy with above-the-line advertising, travel trade co-op promotions, direct sales, trade shows, and others to help integrate holistically. I don't want anyone to leave the session today saying that social media is our only channel, is one of many, and we think it's more insightful for businesses to learn about this new and emerging trend.
Well, that's fantastic. So we really want to thank you all for joining us today and taking time out of your, we know, very busy day. And we really look forward to seeing some of you at Rendezvous Canada next month in Ottawa or at a tourism event in your region soon. So stay in touch with us on Twitter and Facebook and visit us on the corporate site often. And we just want to leave you with, keep exploring.